All right, we're live. Everyone, it's Jared and Dave with the happy hour. We're on with Becky Edwards tonight, and she is challenging Mike Lee for the Utah Senate seat that's up this year. And so we're just gonna kind of ask her what her platform is. We've got to ask her. We've been instructed by her campaign manager to ask her about a yellow coat that is that
fashionably sported.
Yeah, that she's sporting tonight. And just kind of get a feel for her and give her the chance to introduce herself to Willa County. How are you doing tonight, Becky?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here with you. And we've had a chance since we've been in the campaign to be in Willa County several times. So this is nice to be in this setting on a podcast with you folks and talk a little bit more about the campaign. So thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So let's get right into it. Tell us about the yellow coat.
The yellow coat. The yellow coat is actually part of the Yellow Couch Tour. Now, you may be wondering, what is the Yellow Couch Tour? So here's the story behind the Yellow Couch. And I don't have it with me because it's being delivered to a park around the corner. I'm actually in Sandy right now. We're having an event at a park around the corner, but I'm at a home in this Zoom podcast. But when I served in the Utah House as a Republican from Davis County for 10 years, from 2009 to 2018, every Saturday morning, I would open up my house during the legislative session. So this was maybe 9 Saturdays a year for 10 years. And people would come in my living room and we'd eat bagels. We'd talk about politics, different bills that were going on. People would share their stories, their challenges, things that they were facing. And I'd listen and I'd learn from their stories. And these folks ended up becoming dear friends, people that I relied on as experts in different areas of their lives when we had pieces of legislation throughout the rest of the time I served. And so when I decided to run for the U.S. Senate, one of the real challenges was going to be, I just don't think I'm going to be able to have the whole state into my living room. But I had loved that process, right, of sitting on couches, listening and learning. And then it hit me. Instead of having the people in my house, how about I take a piece from my home around the state? And I just happen to have a yellow couch that fits in the back of my Volkswagen Atlas. It's more like yellow love seat, but that's not quite as catchy as yellow couch. So it fits in the back of the car. We haul that thing around from last June on until it got super cold, like October. And we were putting it in rec centers, in parks, all over the state. And then it's had a tiny hiatus during the winter, but it is reemerging tonight. And so in honor of the Yellow Couch Tour, I'm wearing a yellow coat as we're going to be headed out to Sandy, to this park, and have an opportunity to visit with people and tell folks a little bit about why I'm in the race, hear a little bit about their concerns, and have an opportunity to have some good discussions.
Good. That is a pretty genius idea, Becky. I have to say, so my wife is a staunch Mike Lee supporter, but when we were at the convention, she absolutely marveled at your capacity to make a campaign display. And in fact, she marveled at your balloons. I think you told her she could take them, but she said, no, thanks. But she did want to.
You know what? We did have a good showing at the convention, and man, I love those conventions. Actually, the Yellow Couch was at the state convention, and had a lot of folks come by and want to take pictures there. But I'll give a shout out to Mayberry Balloon Company. Mary Leishman out of Bountiful did our balloons, and she is a balloon artist. And just kind of fun on Saturday, I guess a couple of weeks ago now, to see all the creativity that people put into their booths and the effort that went in from the candidates, but honestly, mostly from the delegates. These folks who were elected on March 8th as delegates from their neighborhoods have worked their tails off for 6 or 7 weeks to meet with candidates, do some in person, a lot of Zoom meetings, and really vet the people that they were going to be voting on. And so kudos to every person who was elected as a delegate. And that process, I think, is something that I have a deep respect for, having had 5 elections with delegates during my service in the Utah House.
So you've actually been in service for 5 sessions already through the state house.
Yeah, for 5 terms. So for 10 years. So from 2009 to 2018.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
So what motivated you to decide to move up, or at least try to?
Well, after I actually had said that I would term limit myself after 10 years. This is something that at the very beginning, my very first time I ran, I said, if I'm fortunate enough to continue to get elected, I promise that I'll step down after 10 years, because I really do believe in term limits and this idea that there's no one person who has all the answers. So it's really, especially on state level, this is something that a lot of folks really could be great contributors to the discussions and help advance the issues. And so that's why I did step down. Then my husband and I went to American Samoa on an LDS humanitarian mission. And we were there for almost 2 years, came home last January, so January of 2021, and jumped into this race a few months later. And really with the intent to bring some of the same skill set and mindset about what it meant to be a productive, proactive leader representing the people in our community, and feeling like there was an opportunity to bring better leadership to the U.S. Senate. And that's why I'm in the race.
What difference in leadership do you want to bring?
Well, with all due respect to our good Senator Lee, what I've seen too much of on his part is conversations that end with him saying no, and then just end with a period. And what I'd like to see more of from him, because I do respect his standing on his principles, is no, comma, and here's how I think we could make that issue better, or no, comma, here are the other people I think need to be part of this conversation. Here's how we could, scale down that piece of legislation, or try and add more fiscal responsibility to this issue or whatnot, and to be part of more productive, solutions oriented, rather than just ending with no vote and that's the end. And so for me, it's really pragmatic. It's a pragmatic approach based on solutions and less about sound bites. And for me, in my service, over and over, I was able to find common ground with people across the aisle, but most importantly, within the spectrum of the Republican Party, bringing people together and really serving as a leader on some issues that were really top of mind to Utahns during the years that I was serving. And that kind of an approach of bringing people together, looking for solutions, moving things forward, that's what I think people want. It's what I want to see in someone in the U.S. Senate. And as we've been going around the state since June, it's what I'm hearing from people across the state, in these small communities, rural areas, across the Wasatch Front. People just want to see someone who they're very clear on, understands them, cares about them, and is working hard for solutions for them. And that's what I think I can bring to the U.S. Senate.
Becky, in your service to the state, in that 10 years, you said you reached across the aisle. Did you ever reach across the aisle in your own party to maybe smooth out our DABC alcohol laws?
Oh man, our alcohol laws in Utah have a really interesting history. They have interesting dynamics. You have a lot of voices who are part of those conversations saying, this doesn't, make sense from a tourism standpoint. You've got kind of this, some challenges with how it portrays Utah. On the other hand, you've got public safety folks. You have people who are really wanting to make sure that we have something that honors our traditional legacy. And so you have a lot of voices at the table. And I think that absolutely thanks for bringing that up. That was an issue that was right in my living room nearly every year, because we had issues with this, and we had the whole bringing down the Zion curtain, in restaurants, and some really in the weeds issues around that, but over and over helping people understand what the intent was of some of those alcohol laws here in Utah. And also we passed a law that brought down the blood alcohol limit. And those were really powerful conversations and powerful committee meetings, because there were folks who came in and testified, as people do when they make the effort to come up to the state capitol. They're sharing their personal stories. They're sharing their experiences with whatever the issue is. And I have such a deep respect for people who make the effort and put a personal face on the issue. So absolutely, those were things that we talked about, and as a Republican Party really came to grips with a lot of the different voices on those issues.
So what's your feelings on it? Should the DABC be left, or should it be dissolved like the communist organization it is, and allow the free market to enter the alcohol sales in Utah?
Well, I think, the people of Utah, I'm not sure that I would necessarily agree with the communist organization.
Okay, you're correct. Socialist, I guess we should say.
Step by step, Jared. Come on.
By definition, it is socialist.
I hear what you're saying, though.
No one can argue against it. When the government owns the means of production and or sale, that is dictionary socialism.
It is not a free marketplace. I will grant you that.
It's not even a Northern Europe marketplace. It is a Iron Curtain is on the other side of it marketplace.
Yeah. I think this is, in my race right now as someone running for the United States Senate, I'm going to defer to this as a clearly state issue. But you're right on track with the kinds of conversations that are embedded here. And I'm going to say that this brings up a really good point, that a lot of the things that impact people's everyday, you have an opportunity as a candidate to say, hey, that's actually something the county takes care of. Or, that's a city issue, that's a state issue, that's a federal issue. And when I was running for state issues, the state legislature, there'd be sometimes people would bring up issues, and I'd say, well, that's, the same thing. Like it's a federal issue. It's not something that we deal with. And so having the proper understanding of government is helpful. But mostly, let me add a belief I have about the importance of having things be the more local control we can provide on any issue is the best. It's something that I certainly support, and free market is an important thing. So, for your people who are listening right now to this and thinking, this, and they're starting to think like, maybe this is something I care about and I want to know more about. Absolutely. Reach out to your state legislators. The website le.utah.gov is the state website. You can look up who your legislators are. Maybe you can, put this on your site or your feet or whatever that's happening.
Oh, we
And
got them covered, Becky. Don't worry, we're already on their heels.
you're already on it. I
Everyone.
can't tell you anything you don't already know. But empower people to do that, because I know, as someone who has spent 10 years in a state government, man, those voices really matter, especially when they say in the subject line, from your constituent. You pay attention to that.
Well,
And yeah.
we have a friend of the show who started up a wine cellar, and the 28% initial tax just to do that stuff in the state of Utah, and his inability to branch out shut him down, lasted less than a year, and that's destroying economy. But
he
that
put a
is
lot
again,
into it.
that is again a state issue. Let's move on to a national issue.
Let's do the ESG.
Well, hold on.
wanna do that
This is I want to ask my national issue question. We'll
all
get
right,
to
all
that.
right. Stand by, Becky.
I'm a radical. I happen to like it when the Senate locks up and does nothing, because I can think of 4 or 5 times in my lifetime when bills have passed the Senate, which has been, let's just say, horrible. And I'm talking, well, let's go back. The 94 crime bill is a crime. The NDAA is a crime. The Patriot Act is a crime. When these are bills that have been used, were written and have been used, and they've eroded the liberty of a supposed free nation. And that's why I like it when they say no, bring something back better. I mean, the 94 crime bill, if you want to point to one circumstance that has impoverished the inner city and left them with nothing, that would be one of them. That and the welfare acts of the 60s. Those have destroyed the inner cities. They've left those young men and women with very few opportunities, and it's destroyed whole cities. I mean, Detroit at one time in your lifetime was the greatest city on earth. And now, it's a bombed out ruin, and it's a bombed out ruin because of government.
Well, you're absolutely right. Listen, I don't think anyone here in this conversation right now thinks that it's okay to pass that kind of legislation that destroys opportunities for people to exert and experience liberty, have an opportunity to grow and thrive and kind of have self-determination. And when that gets removed because of legislation that's bad, that's nobody's idea of how we should be treating our fellow Americans. And, the reality is, though, that we send people to Congress to do a job, and they have 2 jobs. One is to enact legislation, not simply for the reason of enacting, but to try and make things better, right things that are wrong, and improve things that need to be fixed. And in addition, then they hold those purse strings. So the power of the purse is a pretty important thing. Here's my concern with gridlock and obstructionism, and what we see sometimes when the government shuts down. It actually doesn't move the needle forward. It's expensive. The last time the government shut down cost Utah billions of dollars.
Well, isn't the government shutdowns used as a punishment device for the other party, is what it looks like from the outside?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not an effective way to legislate.
But it's not. But I mean, we are so far in debt. Right now, my great-grandchildren aren't going to be able to pay us out of debt.
No. I don't know how old your kids are, but I'm telling you, the phrase used to be like your great grandchildren. And then like a few years ago, it was like, hey, our grandkids are going to have this burden. I'm really concerned about our children now, and thinking this is devastating. And here's the thing, guys, this is not just in the past 2 years. This lack of fiscal responsibility has been for decades, and it was not any more recent than, in fact, the last time we passed a balanced budget, Congress passed a balanced budget, was in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe you have listeners who are young enough to not even have been alive then. It's deeply concerning that not too long after that was passed, we had, then the next administration escalated the spending, and of course under the Obama administration even higher, and even under the former administration even higher than under Obama, and now under Biden it's just gone to hell in a handbasket. We have to get this under control, and one of the reasons why I'm so distressed by this gridlock that I'm mentioning to you is because when Congress is like this and does not have productive conversations with each other, and this is, across the aisle within each other's parties, we create this, out of that ineffectiveness, creates this leadership vacuum that the executive branch is more than happy to step into and take charge and start to issue executive order after executive order. And that overreach is imbalance. It's a devastating imbalance of what our government should be. Executive, legislative, and judicial branches kind of balancing in this checks and balances. When we don't have that, we get into trouble, because what I think we all can agree on is the executive branch is no way to legislate, and they are out of control. And we've seen that fiscally, we've seen it with different legislation. And so this is why when I say productive, I'm not talking about anything more than just doing your job. And back in the day, we used to see people coming together, people from different parties, even sitting down, trying to work stuff out, working on, back and forth on bills and issues. And we didn't think a whole lot about it. It was just called doing their job. But nowadays, when we see folks come together on like this bipartisan Senate bill on infrastructure, for example, and we know the Biden's infrastructure bill was absolutely not sustainable. It was too expensive. It went way beyond what I think most people thought even made sense. It was everything and like 5 kitchen sinks thrown in there. So we have, this group trying to sort of cobble together something, and it made a lot of news, and people were like, wow, that's amazing. Well, it shouldn't be amazing. It should just be something that is normal, should be called doing your job and rolling up your sleeves, sitting at the table and getting stuff done. Here's one thing I want to add here is that you can do that. You can find common ground and still bring with you all of those Republican principles, all of your deep commitment to fiscal responsibility and all of those things. They stay with you. They're embedded in your public service. But with that, I truly believe you can move the needle forward on issues. And if we had more self-control within every member of Congress and more willingness to sit down and have a deep examination of the spending that has gotten out of control, I think we could make some movement.
Well, I think when you look at bills that had passed on a national level, they always passed on positive ones. We have lots of negative ones. Negative ones have always passed in it's a crisis. We got to have all your gold. That happened. And then they took the gold at 28 cents or 33 cents an ounce. And then, 4 or 5 years later, gave it back at, I think it was $5.25 an ounce or whatever the numbers are, so they just robbed the populace of all its wealth. So, but the bills that pass that are successful are small bills that don't impact the whole nation. We've got to quit thinking that our problem solving is done thousands of miles away by people who are, even if they're from that state, and this is no offense to any senator, are disassociated with what's going on in their state. Because a bill that works for California, even though we're much closer to California than Washington, is not going to work in Utah, and vice versa. And then we keep having these bills come across where successful people, successful states, successful counties have to front the bill for failed states, failed counties, failed people. And that's got to stop too. We've got to quit punishing. I mean, I don't know if you've ever owned a business, but one of the biggest faults you can have is where if you have an employee that performs, you load the unperforming employees' labor on top of them. And that's what our nation's doing. So me personally, I love it when they say no. I love government gridlock. And I think we should the states should get their land back. We need to wrestle the land back from Nixon stealing it from us.
Well, I couldn't agree more with what you're talking about not having a one size fits all. There's no way that someone in DC understands what our needs are here in Utah and how unique they are versus California or even our adjacent neighbor states here, Colorado, Arizona, Wyoming, Idaho. I mean, we're very, very unique, very different. And this is why the best thing to do is, you mentioned two things I couldn't agree with more. Number one, stop having these bills that have 500 things in them. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, like let's have more targeted, strategic things that we're talking about, so we can actually have a productive debate and say, does this make sense? Is this something, first of all, that is it the proper role of government? Is this the right level of government, layer of government? Is this something that could be done better at the state level or more local even than that? And is it something we can afford? I mean, these are all lenses through which you look at legislation, but having something that is more simplified, absolutely. Bringing this down on a more local level, couldn't agree more.
Becky, is there a way to actually rein that in through our government? It seems like it's just tradition to pack a million things into one bill so it can get passed rather than separating all the votes for smaller issues and passing them one by one.
You know, I think some of it's expediency, thinking, well, maybe they feel like they don't have time to, certainly takes more time to talk about, each thing individually, single issue bills or whatever. But I think it's more reflective of the fact that we have this increasingly divided dialogue in DC. And so when one party gets in power, they're like, oh man, this is our chance. We are going to throw everything we can into our legislation. And it's like what we're seeing right now with the Biden administration is that the administration is really falling prey to the extremes within the Democratic Party and their agendas. And that's, I think, one reason why we're seeing such extreme legislation that doesn't make sense from the state of Utah and actually doesn't make sense for the country. And it would be a whole lot better if we did what we're talking about here. And in addition, if we had relationships of trust. Now, this may seem like, wow, how are we going to get to that point? But I think we can. We've been there before. We've had better dialogue within the United States Congress. We have to go back a few years to get to that place, but I genuinely think we can get there. And what's the benefit of that is that you could have more productive conversations with each other. And part of that's based on relationships of trust and an actual desire and a willingness to show respect and all of that. And we know that there aren't people sitting at the table right now doing that super frequently. We as Republicans may need to be the first person at that table. We may need to continue to offer that approach to service, that approach to legislating, that approach to coming together in order to see more of this, because I truly believe it's what people want to see. People want to see more of that approach where people do the work. I mean, at the end of the day, Congress is not working for the people of Utah. It's not working for the people of America. And put simply, Congress is not working.
This bill thing, it seems like we want to push every new law to a national level, and that's not the place of the Senate or the Congress.
No.
They were supposed to deal with international, national defense, and commonwealth between states, but not necessarily pass laws that force all the states under one umbrella. We're supposed to be a melting pot of ideas, and we've lost that. And you're right. We're in football politics. The Republicans are going to sweep come up October. Now, granted, the Republicans don't seem to get as radical with their bill laying as the Democrats do, but that's because the Republicans are conservative and conservatives are anti-radical ideologies, where the Democrats right now, they're under a progressive hat, which they're going to push progressive ideologies, trying to force, super Medicaid on everyone or force any of that. So I think you're right on that. I in my lifetime, every time I've seen both sides of the aisle work together, we've been screwed and hard.
Well, I just think it's a model that's a whole lot better than what we're seeing with, like you said, the football politics. Or I like football too much to disparage it by associating it with this model of politics. I call it ping pong, but it's the same concept. It's just the extreme back and forth. And I sure would like to see things better.
To me, it reminds me of a pendulum. The Republicans ran away with it in the late 90s, early 2000s with the wanting to teach creationism in science, which is why the Democrats had the mandate. Now the Democrats have ran for the fences, which is why the Republicans are going to win. And I'm hoping that I can stand in the way of the Republicans acting crazy this time. I'm just hoping I can. If I can keep them from acting crazy, maybe we can stop the pendulum from swinging even harder, because this shake is going to shake our nation apart. And
well, every extreme seems to be getting deeper, and a little bit more crazy.
Yeah, crazier and crazier. And so it is going to shake our nation apart. But we do have a bunch of comments in. We know you've got to get onto Yellow Couch Tour. A lot of people asking you questions.
Let's start with the ESG one. This is a new topic for a lot of people. It's something I've been working on since 2013, believe it or not. But now it's here. It looks like it's coming. What is your opinion on ESG? And that means environmental social governance score.
Yes.
Yeah. I would love to hear how you got involved in 2013, because I think for a lot of folks, they're like, hey, this is new, because it's just new, like it's on the awareness of people now, but it's been around for a while. How did you find it, or what's your involvement with it?
Oh, well, I'll be quick and brief. In 2013, I began a platform called buymyhonor.com, and it was a way for people to create honor contracts with each other and give each other scores based upon interactions with each other on a parallel level. Where the ESG, I knew that if that void wasn't filled, you would have the governments and corporations look down on the peasants and give them a score. So my attempt was to try to make it a parallel environment where we could deal with each other on a peer-to-peer basis. And unfortunately, I just couldn't get the funding and make the time to make it work. But here we go. Now we have the government will tell us what we're worth. But so just to maybe bring everyone up to speed a little bit. So it's a scoring system that scores a company's environmental and social impact. And it it's been around for a while. It's gotten, I think, more extensive to the point where it moved away a little bit from being something that was consumer driven,
kind of like what you're talking about. You wanted to see some kind of parity or level playing field in terms of the scoring or indicators. So if one company says, I'm really good on this front, whatever it is, and then another company says, hey, I am too, as a consumer, you're not sure. Are we apples to apples, apples to asparagus? What's going on here? And so I think that's kind of how it started, like that it was consumers wanted to know, they wanted some certainty around this, but it's certainly grown a lot since that time. And it's, what I'm hearing from people is, wait a sec, is this involvement in markets? Is this the kind of thing that we're going to see what happening here in the US that we see happening in China, where even in some cases, individuals have ESG scores or companies, and it is preventing people from having access to capital and some other things like that. So the concept of social investing, and as consumers being able to say, I want to invest in company A because I like what they do, but not in company B because I don't want to invest in companies that deal in tobacco or whatever it is, that's something that people are opposed to. And so having clear information that is accurate and reliable and whatever that people can depend on, that's something that's important. And I think the concern right now with ESG is that it has moved beyond that goal, and that it is, people are concerned that it is impacting market forces and access to capital. And I think it's something that we need to continue to look at, and its impact maybe on our bond rating, even here in the state. I think there's a lot of unknowns still, and we're really clear on what it looks like when it's super, super messed up, like what we see in China. Nobody wants us to get to that point. I don't want to see us there. And so how do we create protections for both businesses and consumers, and do it in a way that doesn't create bigger burdens for folks and also mess with our market? So that was kind of a long answer. Sorry about that. But I do think it's something that people are just kind of coming to an awareness of right now, even though it's been around for a while.
I'm okay if the consumer does that, but where banks, obviously, they get the money first from the government, and then they have special laws where they can lend money that doesn't even exist yet through fractional reserve banking. I think that
there's only one direction this can go. As a government looking down on the people, it can only go in one direction.
I think we've got to keep the government separated from it. We've got to make sure. Honestly, I don't like fascism as much as I don't like communism. And if the government steers companies through an ESG type rating, I think you're touching into fascism in a very uncomfortable way. I think unless the consumers do it, it's wrong. Yeah.
Well, I think, like I say, I think everyone can point to where it has gone to a very, very destructive extreme. And none of us want to get to that place at all. So.
And honest media is the way you deal with that. An honest media that's going to report if you have local businesses that is abusing the environment or things like that. That's the way you address it. But right now our media seems to be for sale to the highest bidder too. So.
And it's in addition to that, it's holding, like I said, apples to apples. So companies are held accountable for, let's say, environmental impact in the same vein. So one company is not held to one standard, another to a different standard. You want to have some certainty, because at the end of the day, consumers and how they invest their money, how they spend their money, we want people to, those are hard-earned dollars. We don't want the government involved taking people's money, impacting, like I say, markets. I mean, at the end of the day, we do best when capitalism is strong. So I think we can agree there.
Yeah, we need to get back to property rights. That's when the world is wealthiest. All right. You ready for a tough one?
I'm ready. Hit me up,
All
because
right.
I'm going to have to leave in about 10 minutes.
Okay, so we're just going to run through
my
these.
couch.
I'm
All
not
right.
going to
I'll
add
try
in.
and give you some faster answers.
I'm not going to interdict you and try to change your political mindset anymore. All right. We have apparently you voted for Joe Biden in 2020, and can you give us some reasons why?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think, I'll tell you right now, I'll be honest with you. As an elected official, I'll always be straightforward. I'll be honest, and it'd be awfully easy to say that's a private decision. I'm not going to share that, or to be untruthful here. But I'll straight up tell you why. I was concerned when I saw some of the things in the former administration, former president, that I'll just mention two. One was, as a former emergency room social worker who dealt with women who came in who had experienced sexual assault and domestic violence and violence, those kinds of crimes. And I was the first responder in the emergency room in those situations. That was awfully difficult for me to come to grips with the fact that our person in the highest office in the land had bragged about some of those very kinds of approaches to women. That was pretty hard for me. Second thing that was really a challenge was the fact that when we had probably 18 months out from the election, we started to hear rumblings and comments of, hey, this is not going to be a fair election. And sowing seeds of doubt and dissent and concern about things that hadn't even happened. We had no sense that they were going to happen. And that was concerning to me, because, you mentioned a football analogy there. That's not how you play. That's not how you fairly compete. You don't walk into a game and saying, if we lose, it's going to be because the refs were out to get us.
Isn't that what the Democrats did 4 years before?
It doesn't make it right. It does not make it right. So those were my concerns. And I was hoping that we would, and I'd seen this divided, dialogue nationally and even here in our state, and thought, man, I really want to get back to someplace that would be more, have an opportunity to bring people together more, because I think that's a productive way to govern. And I was hopeful that we'd see that under then Senator Biden. We haven't. In fact, as I mentioned before, we've seen the extremes on the Democratic Party pull and be such a magnetic pull there that we have seen the divided dialogue increase under this administration. I've been disappointed in the scope of legislation. I've been disappointed in the lack of leadership. And, that's another thing that I'm really hoping to be able to contribute to, is more accountability on both sides of the aisle, because, man, I really hope we can do better than what we're seeing.
I would
right
like
now
to see some accountability.
Becky, if you were the deciding force on who received the Democratic nominee out of that group of people, can you tell me who you would have chosen?
Tell me why it was Tulsi Gabbard in how many ever sentences you want.
I'll tell you, Tulsi Gabbard is impressive. I want to share a little story about her, because I mentioned my husband and I were on a LDS mission in American Samoa. And so we're out in the middle. I mean, this is during the whole 2020
now, is
election.
she also the congresswoman, or is she
was Hawaiian? She was a Hawaiian Congress lady.
But does that also cover Samoa?
It doesn't cover Samoa because they're a territory. I mean, American Samoa is a territory, like
Puerto Rico.
But here's the cool thing. Suddenly I start seeing all these Tulsi Gabbard signs all over, and I'm thinking, that's kind of unusual. What's going on? Well, it turns out Tulsi Gabbard was born in American Samoa, and or at least lived there when she was a child. And her, this is a Polynesian community that has deep roots there. Loves this woman, and you may not know this, but the territory of American Samoa has a higher rate of participation in the military than any other state or territory anywhere. And so this is something that they feel deeply, this community feels deeply. And when Tulsi Gabbard, one of their own from a Polynesian community of mixed race, and that she served in the military, man, I sure learned a lot about her and was terribly impressed.
Yeah, she's perfect on everything except 2A. This will be another my personal. What's your stance on Second Amendment?
Second Amendment, strong
Yes.
supporter of the Second Amendment. Concealed carry permit owner. Actually, when I was in the Utah House, I voted for constitutional carry.
All
and
right.
then that bill was later vetoed by then Governor Herbert.
Yeah. I remember that. It came back again, and it won through. Okay, let's go back to the listener questions. We only got you for a few more minutes, and then you got to get to the yellow couch.
Are you having a good time, Becky? Is it a good
you know
podcast
what?
or what?
I am having a good time. I am. This is a great opportunity to, you hear people say this, but I think most people probably mean it, because I mean it. It is an amazing opportunity to get around the state and visit with everyday Utahns. I'm loving that. I'm loving seeing people and having them say, tell me their stories and say, I really hope you win. I hope that we can have somebody bring us back to leadership that I can feel proud of, bring us back to, someone who will get stuff done, who understands me. And people, especially in rural parts of the state, even, Tooele County, you're not necessarily rural, but you kind of are. I mean, I know folks in Tooele County feel like you're forgotten in some ways, even though you're really just so close here to the Wasatch Front. But it is such a privilege. I have grown a deep love for so many communities that were new to me in this setting. And my husband teases me because I'm constantly coming home and saying, hey, I found a new place for us to retire. I think we should retire in Ephraim. Or, what about up in Daggett County? I'm like, that's an awfully beautiful lake up there.
I would be looking towards Nevada because they're easier on taxes. Your money goes a little bit further, and you hit northern Nevada, and they don't care what you build on your land.
Well, there you go. I don't know. This is a beautiful state.
It is.
Good people, and it has been a great privilege.
It is. All right. So we have just a few more to run through, and
Okay.
yeah, I like your stance on 2A. That's a good one. All right. Do you have buyer's remorse on voting for Joe Biden?
I'll tell you, I've been really disappointed. Absolutely. I've been disappointed. And for me, my engagement has never ended with the day I dropped that ballot in the mail. It continues on. And right now, my way that I'm continuing to make good on that effort there is to run for the U.S. Senate.
We have one comment. I worked for Mike Lee when he shut down the government. He wasn't doing anything to help, just grandstanding. I think my personal feeling, we need to let the 10th Amendment reign. It's on the first page, folks. We can go with it. Matter of fact, let's put the 9th before the 10th, like they did. Let those two reign, and then then the government shutdowns won't matter. But just my personal feeling, I don't think we should rely on Washington, D.C., whether we can go see a mountain here in Utah.
That was nice, Jared. I like that. I'm going to write that one down.
Man, that should be
Kind of
emblazoned
inspirational.
in brass somewhere. The crime bill was his doing with the help of ridiculous Senate. She's talking about the 94 crime bill. That was Joe Biden. Yes, he's the one who, he didn't write it up. I know he liked to claim he did, but he didn't. It was written by committee, but he is the one that introduced it and pushed it through and whipped it into session. The 94 crime bill, which is detestable. It's been detestable for our law enforcement. It's decreased trust in law enforcement. It has increased the war on drugs, which also has decreased law enforcement's role outside of the purview that makes them legitimate. And it's destroyed our inner cities.
We have no balanced budget. How would she remedy that? And that's a good point. Like,
yeah,
are we even remediable?
Is it possible? What would you do? Well, let's tackle inflation first. What would be some steps to rein inflation? And what are we sitting at right now? 8.7 according to the Fed on their new numbers, which honestly, it's probably closer to 15.
It's devastating. I'm really concerned about our economy. I'm going to try and answer both of those about inflation and also spending. Can we do something? And I think for far too long, people have been like, well, we either pass the balanced budget amendment or we do nothing. And that's not okay. It's not an either this pipe dream of balanced budget amendment, which I support too. And let's move towards that. Let's fight for that. But in the meantime, there's a lot of fiscal responsibility we can do on, every single entity that is receiving government funding. There are things that as I said, members of Congress, they hold those purse strings. We need to have transparency and accountability. And I'll just share one example of this. In the Utah State Constitution, we are required as legislators, they were required to pass a balanced budget, right? You can't do what the feds do here in Utah. Many states have this provision, but it doesn't mean it's easy or it just magically happens. My first legislative session I came in was 2009. It was the first year that we passed or created a full year's budget based on the revenue that we were seeing from the recession. And so it was really hard. Those were hard conversations. And the very first week, the legislature sat down and said, okay, we're going to ask every state agency to create a proposed budget that would reflect a 20% cut. And the agencies were like, wait, what? How is that possible? So for the first few weeks of the session, you're kind of working on some projections of what the revenue is going to be. And about halfway through the legislative session, sometime in February, you get the real numbers that you can say, okay, this is actually what we can build our budget on. And at the end of the day, we didn't have to cut anybody 20%. But there were agencies and entities that received 9% cuts, some 6, some 13. And those were really hard conversations. But at the end of the day, and this is a model that I'd like to see on the federal level too, and I think it's possible, those conversations, people had to decide what was their core mission? What were 2 or 3 priorities that they really, their must do's that they absolutely had to accomplish? And then were there new innovations, innovative ways to be more efficient with dollars, technology that allowed them to do it for less cost, et cetera? Those were conversations that allowed people to actually see, oh, we can do things differently. And budgets were cut and services were improved by some of those really painful conversations. But it was the will of the elected officials to do it. Plus, like I say, we're required to, but even if we weren't, this model of transparency, accountability, and consistent examination of mission and priorities, I think that's a good model. It requires an ability, again, to work within your individual committees and be someone that can build relationships with agencies and other folks and interagency cooperation, figure out how to do. First, I'm going to go back to the things I said earlier. What's the proper role of government? Is this something we can afford? Is this something that we could have states be in charge of without strings? None of that federal government string stuff, because listen, having served in the state, I understand what it feels like and what it's like when the federal government comes in and they're like, hey, we're going to give you this, but here are 10 million strings attached, and you don't actually get to decide how you spend the money, or actually a new program we're going to mandate, and it's an unfunded mandate. And so I've been on the other end of that. I'm highly sensitive to what that feels like.
Well, we don't
And-
need to badmouth the Department of Education so early in the show. Anyways, but no, I'm sorry. That was a bad joke. I mean, honest,
It wasn't that bad, actually.
okay. It was a ill-timed joke. No,
but I'm going to say I'm just looking at the time here on my computer.
I know.
I need to be around the corner at my couch in 2 minutes. But
okay, we're running through these real quick.
Let her wrap up with a closing statement. And
Well, do we want to go through these? Like, what do you think about the Ministry of Truth?
Ministry
The
of-
Biden's new disinformation.
We'll make that the last question.
Yeah.
The Ministry of Truth. Tell us about it.
Ministry of Truth. Now I feel like I'm on a Harry Potter game show.
No, that'd be
That's our life.
Orwell game show. Ministry of
1984.
Truth.
Listen, all I know is that all I know is that at the end of the day, the people, everyday Americans, want people back in DC who are going to protect their liberties, work hard for them, and remove barriers that are in their way, that are preventing them from growing and thriving and starting and being successful as business owners, running ranches here in our state, growing their families. That's what people want. They don't like all this other baloney, this kind of stuff that doesn't make sense and feels like is something people are putting out to increase division, or is not part of a core mission of our government, which quite honestly, as Republicans, should be pretty limited. So let's step away from these kinds of things, get back to the core values of the Republican Party: fiscal responsibility, liberty, self-sufficiency, local control of government. These are things that I worked on and supported for 10 years in the Utah House. I'm looking forward to being in a position to take those to the US Senate and work in a productive way on behalf of the people across the state, including your good listeners in Tooele County and across the state. And I'm so appreciative to have the opportunity to be here with you tonight. Thank you so much.
Good closer.
Thank you, Becky.
Becky, there's more comments, more questions on, if you go to Tooele Happy Hour, just click on the video. There's more comments and questions.
If you're a Facebook user, please come onto the site and maybe answer a few of those later on if you can.
Yeah, jump on there. There's
Okay.
there's a few comments and questions on there.
The interaction, our customers love the interaction. So if
They
you
do.
can.
That'd be awesome. And I'd always love to come back on this show again.
You're
So,
welcome anytime.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Putting that out there. Thanks, you two.
Just send us an email. We'll get you on, everyone. Becky Edwards, if you do have more questions for her, reach out to her directly. Hopefully she can get on and hit up these questions here.
Let me give you my website too. It's beckyforutah.com. And if people want to reach out, there's a link on there that they can reach out to the campaign with other questions and engagement. We'd love to participate. So anyway, thank you. I'm going to say I leave. I hope I'm not closing out your whole show.
Becky, we'll go ahead and let you off the hook here for you.
All right.
All right.
Thank
you have a
you so
wonderful
much.
night. Thank you.
Good luck.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. So that was Becky Edwards, and I hope that everyone enjoyed the show. Sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions. We had a lot of excellent questions coming in, that's for sure. Man, those were good ones. They're tough ones. Everyone who's listened to this show for more than 10 minutes know that I'm a peculiar being when it comes to government. But yeah, I wanted to ask her, does she think it's possible to see our Senate and Congress go virtual in the future? That way, maybe us further out west has senators that stay in our state and maybe have a better pulse on what's going on in our state.
Or maybe Russians can make virtual clones of our senators and beam in for us
They could
and jam their
you see
system,
Senator whoever in there
right?
talking with the rolling R's and a lot of ski being
Yes,
said.
comrades.
Wrestling a bear. Anyways, another thing I wanted to ask is well, I had a lot of questions, but I'm trying to push this 10th Amendment thing. I think that's a big push for me right now. And I don't know, it seems like it's kind of lost in the weeds.
A lot of people don't know what the 10th Amendment really is or how to digest it. I mean, that's one of those more obscure ones, unfortunately.
It is, but it's in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is 1 through 10, and so it should be foremost, but it's been lost. It's been lost when we went from those United States to the United States, and that was a nomenclature change that happened due to the Civil War. It's all good times. But anyways, everyone, sorry we didn't get to all your questions. You guys had some fantastic ones on there. Maybe we can pick through a few of them.
Nobody wants to hear our opinion, Jared.
Yeah, that's true. They probably heard too much.
They probably already know it.
Do you think the delegates were a good representation of the voting base? Man, that is a great question. That would have been an outstanding one had we gotten that low. We don't need to ask her to see that they aren't. Governor Herbert lost at convention and swept the primary. Mike Lee has been a dominant contender through the caucus convention system. Do you think that would change? He has had about 40% approval rating within the Republican Party and has been trending down. I think it could happen. They started answering each other's questions. This is good. I like it when the chat starts.
Do you think she stands a chance to beat Mike Lee in the primary?
Do I?
Yeah.
Just seeing the fervor that was at the caucus, no. But that depends. Were unengaged voters ignoring the caucus and then they're going to show up and vote? It is an off year, an extremely hard time to bring out a big amount of voters. I mean, we'll get probably, Holly could tell us more likely, but we'll get probably 60% of the voters will get in 2 more years on any stance, just because we have turned this into football politics where the only election that matters is the president. Mm-hmm. When in reality, the only election that matters is your mayor and your city councilor. Those are truly the only ones that matter. And I want to bring everyone to focus in on that. One way to wrestle back control from Washington, D.C. is if we sent a message that registered voters showed up to vote for their mayor, and numbers don't matter. It's percentages. And if the mayors can come out and say, look, I had this massive wave of registered voters voting, even if it was a split vote, still a massive amount voting. And if the president had this little trickle, 35% of registered voters voted.
That'll never happen. I mean, it's an interesting
actually
theoretical, but
we hit closer to the presidential numbers than not. We're sitting down around 40% in the presidential election people vote. The sad thing is we just get less than that in the local elections, and we need more people showing up to that. And that's what I'm hoping we'll provide. We can get out and do more and stump for that.
Well, maybe if the power of the president and the executive branch is pruned back.
That's how you prune it back, though. You send that message that these people matter. This position matters. Yours doesn't. That's how you prune it back.
It's a chicken or the egg scenario. I don't see.
Well, okay. My way has a nonviolent means of pruning it back. I don't know how else you prune it back. We're not going to get Congress to step up and say, did you just write something from that desk? Is that a law you wrote? That's our purview. We're not going to get Congress to do that.
Yeah, and you bring up a point. Can humanity do something like that in a nonviolent way? I don't think they can.
I think the only way they can is to say you just don't matter.
Right. And
Eventually people will start, they'll start caring what our mayor does, For those people on there, go to our YouTube and listen to Willa's mayor sing the national anthem. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And those are the things I like. That is,
I think
our
like
local mayor.
like a crack addict, they have to reach rock bottom in order to come back to reality.
God, where's rock bottom? Because to me, it feels like we're there.
Oh no.
I mean, seriously, we're pretty soon they're going to be adding commas and zeros to our dollar bills just to buy that loaf of bread.
I'm telling you, everyone's going to wish they voted for anti-tank rocket ammunition in the stores at the end of this.
All right. Anyway, so our county, this is Holly. Holly is an outstanding leader in our county. Our county needs more great governors. Our country needs more great governors to eliminate the powers of our federal government. And we're seeing a lot of that. DeSantis is firing shots at the administration or at the Democrat Party, which the administration takes personally. And yeah, that is true. But I hate to see, DeSantis would be the best next president we could have. I'd like to see like a DeSantis Gabbard ticket, but he would be the best one. But I think we need a strong state. We need a state that won't buy into the BS. Though Kristi Noem, I like her too. It's just, she's in a Dakota. And I mean, that's like Utah being a state that matters. It doesn't. This race is a big one. We have a true conservative as a senior senator and a very moderate junior senator. Why would we want another moderate representing Utah? We have both sides of the spectrum now. And that is another good point. That is another good point. If I don't know, that is a tough question. Would shooting straight down the middle be a benefit to the state of Utah or a benefit to the nation? That's a big question.
Okay, so if we ended up with Becky Edwards and McMullen,
No, it'd be Becky Edwards and Romney is what it would be.
Well, no, I'm talking about for this race.
Oh, you mean against each other? Ooh.
Ed McMuffin.
Yeah, McMullen and Edwards.
McMullen and Edwards.
Now, he's
if you had
running-
to choose those two.
He's running independent, isn't he?
He is, but he does have the backing of the Democrat Party now. So, I mean,
Now,
in effect,
hold on. Isn't Kale still running?
I don't think so.
I still get emails from him. Did they toss Kale out to go with McMillan? Oh, I really like Kale. I mean, it's too bad he represents such a crazy party. Cox would love to have Becky Edwards and Romney together. That's a tough one. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, me personally, I see Lee up there as saying no a lot as a bulwark. I wanted to ask her, has she ever watched when Rand Paul comes out and reads all the different spending that has been passed by Congress every year?
I think anyone who thinks we can resolve our spending issues is a little delusional. I mean,
how many we built
Narnia style?
There's been
crazy.
an economy built around it, like a full-on economy.
Yeah, with the lobbyists to go with it.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But anyways, we were talking about throwing some, doing a little kind of news action earlier, talking about
Well, do you want to come back and do the news?
goings on. So we can, or do you want to just
Yeah,
finish it out right now?
Nope. Let's close it out. Take a quick
Okay.
break, and I'll be right back.
Dave has to
Call of the Wild.
use the little boys' room. But anyways, thanks for joining us. We'll be right back. Well, let's just say that young lady in Tooele that was lost has been found. That was the news. That was kind of the big deal. There was a young lady here in Tooele that had that was missing. Her name was Lexi Palm, and she had been missing for a couple days. They were worried about her. She just left her card and a whole bunch of stuff at her work parking lot, and but she has been found. So that was the news. The news would have been had she not been found. Everyone, this is where you go to join up with groups to go find her.
Now you said she ran away because she was pissed off she got grounded.
That's what I heard. Is she was grounded, so she was angry, so she left. And we don't know if she left to go to a family member's house or a friend's house or whatever else. But
Can you imagine how grounded she is now?
it's a tough one. It depends on what she was grounded for. I don't know the extremes of all that, but I'm glad she was found. That's good news, and we do need some good news.
That we do.
Yeah. Okay. No, they chose McMullen. Really? They went for the independent Republican 4 years ago instead of the Democrat that's been a staunch Democrat forever. It's a tough one, man. That's tough. Yeah. All right. Everyone, thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the comments. That was great. Sorry we didn't get to everyone. Some of them were good too. Man. Yeah. And Holly said, "Oh yeah. Holly's talking about the young lady. Yeah, they found her. She had went south quite a ways, but they found her. She's home safe and sound, and yeah, it was getting nervous. Everyone was hunting around the mountains and the canyons. That's where they were all hunting because she liked to go up the canyons, and they were afraid that, maybe she went up there and angry and something bad happened to her or whatever else. But she's home. She's safe. So, young lady, if you're listening out there, glad you're home, glad you're safe. And, yeah, everything's good. All right, everyone. We'll be back on Friday, right?
That's the plan.
Okay. We'll see you guys Friday night.